Join Screamstream November 30th through December 5th for a deep dish slice of pizza in horror, featuring an interview with Famous Monsters Pizza, horror-inspired pizza recipes from Geeks Who Eat, a slice watch party, and a discussion of the top pizza scenes in horror. Dig in! Screamstream Trivia Tuesdays returns November 24th only on YouTube and Twitch.
Today we have film director, writer, and author and teacher Sam Irvin joining us for an interview. In the full moon world, he's best known for his work on Oblivion and Oblivion 2, but has such a deep and rich history when it comes to filmmaking. So thank you, Sam, for coming on and talking about your career with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is great.
Yeah. So I have obviously a few questions. I guess we'll start out with just kind of the background of everything. So cinema and theaters have been a part of your life from an early age. Can you recall and explain the influence from your father and your grandfather, who both worked in the movie theater business, and had you on, and how that helped shape your view on the business?
Okay. Yes, I was very, very lucky. I grew up, my dad owned movie theaters, and my grandfather was a district manager for a whole chain of theaters in the Southeast. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. So my playground was being at a movie theater. I mean, that's where I would go. And after school or anything, I was just always watching movies. And this was before video cassettes, before you really could own movies. So it was pretty exciting to be able to see films that I loved multiple times and things like that. And I hung out in the projection booth and all that kind of stuff. When I got into my teens, I started booking special like Saturday morning matinees of horror films, of everything that I wanted to see, and I could bamboozle my dad into booking these films, and we'd bring in all the Vincent Price movies and Hammer films, and so that was a really, really great thing to be able to do. Pretty spoiled kid. And then when I was 8 years old, my dad and our family went on a cross-country trip to California. And he got us a VIP tour at Warner Brothers Studios because of his connections in the movie business. And I walked onto two movie sets that changed my life. Yeah. One was The Great Race, and I got to see them shoot this incredible iceberg sequence with Jack Lemmon and Natalie Wood and Tony Curtis. And it was Blake Edwards directing, and they were in this huge soundstage with a tank of water and iceberg and antique cars and wind machines, and just, I mean, it was unbelievable. My eyes popped right out of my head. I thought as a kid, if they were going to shoot an iceberg, they had to go find one, and I didn't realize it could be created on a stage. And I also saw them do some forced perspective with a model of a mansion on a hill that they blew up one end of it. But it was just like a 3-foot tall model. And then you came down the hill, they had a full-size fence and gate, and then they had an actor playing a policeman walking by. And that was in the foreground. And I just thought as a kid, that's not going to work. That's not going to look right. It's just going to look like with a model behind it. But then when you saw the film, it totally sold. And so I learned the concept of forced perspective. And so that was incredible. And then I went on another set that day of Two on a Guillotine, which was a thriller with Dean Jones and Connie Stevens, and watched them shoot a rear screen projection in a sort of chairlift kind of thing. And that was really exciting too. I even got my picture taken on that set. And lo and behold, that was 1964 when I was 8, and literally 50 years later, I directed Connie Stevens' daughter, Jolie Fisher, who is Carrie Fisher's half-sister, in a thriller for Lifetime called Fatal Acquittal. So it was just like some kind of magical kind of thing. But that day was the day that I decided that I wanted to direct movies at 8 years old. And I took my father's movie camera out of his hand. You know, it was a home movie, 8mm camera, and I just never gave it back. And I just started making little, you know, Dracula movies and stuff with my brother. And so that's, you know, and then I was a famous Monsters of Filmland kid, and, you know, just read all of those and watched Shock Theater on Saturday afternoons and saw all the Universal horror greats. And so, you know, I was that kind of monster kid growing up in the 60s, and that just completely formed and shaped my life. When I was, let's see, in 1972, actually 70, I started my own fanzine on horror films. The first one was called Hit, and I did one a year. I would do it in my summer break from school. And I did 2 issues of Pit, and then I changed the name to Bizarre, and we started over again. And so I had 4 annual issues of Bizarre. So it was 1970 through 75 that I was doing this fanzine. And when I graduated from high school, I bamboozled my parents into sending me to London so I could interview all the Hammer film greats and everything for the fanzine. And I got to meet Christopher Lee and everybody, you know, Terrence Fisher, all the incredible people that I interviewed for that magazine. And I had become friendly with Vincent Price, and I ran into him when he lives in California, but I ran into him when I was in London, and he introduced me to Diana Rigg, and I interviewed her. And I mean, it was crazy. When I talked to Christopher Lee, he had me come to lunch at Pinewood Studios, where he was shooting The Man with the Golden Gun, the big James Bond movie, and gave me a tour of the sets. And I mean, I had so much luck. I still pinch myself. I wish I had that kind of luck nowadays. And then when I graduated, well, actually before I graduated from college, I kind of willed it to happen that I would meet Brian De Palma, because he was a filmmaker that I very much admired from his early films like Sisters and Phantom of the Paradise. And I organized a little film festival on campus at the University of South Carolina, where I was going to film school. And I got him to come and got to know him. And then between my junior and senior year, I worked on his film, The Fury, as a production assistant and an extra. And I also wrote a making of journal on the making of it for Cinefantastique magazine. And so then after I graduated, I became De Palma's full-time assistant, and I worked on Dress to Kill. And I also associate produced home movies that had Kirk Douglas and Nancy Allen. And, you know, just that was the start of my business, of being in show business, was really working for De Palma. And then I did a short film called Double Negative about a horror film director who's making a low-budget film called Coat Hanger Massacre. And his sleazy producers, played by Bill Finley of Phantom of the Paradise and Wayne Knight, who's Newman on Seinfeld, they decided that this film, they would make more money if they stole the negative and collect the insurance than if they complete the film. And the director, who's played by Bill Randolph, who was the cab driver in Dress to Kill, and his leading lady, Dory Legg, who had been she grew up with me and been in a lot of my films as a kid. They get wind of this plot, and they have to steal the negative to protect it, to protect their film, get to it first before the producers do. And that film got accepted into Sundance and got a lot of buzz. And then I shot it in 35mm because I wanted it to play in movie theaters. And it opened theatrically in Los Angeles with Martin Scorsese's After Hours, and in New York with John Borman's Emerald Forest, and got a really good review in the New York Times by Janet Maslin. And so that short film was my calling card to get my first feature off the ground, which was Guilty as Charged in 1991, and it was a very dark comedic horror film about a madman played by Rod Steiger, the Oscar winner. He was a madman who kidnapped murderers who'd gotten off and put them on his own death row and fried them in his own electric chair. And it also had Isaac Hayes, Heather Graham, Lauren Hutton, Zelda Rubinstein from Poltergeist. Just incredible cast, and we did, these very sort of German expressionistic sets, and the dungeon was all very, very much looked like a, Universal horror film, and some of the reviews even compared it to James Whale's movies, and he's my all-time favorite, and Bride of Frankenstein is my favorite film of all time. So just to be compared to him, and
it's just a huge honor.
It was unbelievable. It was just, the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. And then that led to, I did another film after that for Showtime. It was a whodunit thriller called Acting on Impulse with Nancy Allen and Linda Fiorentino from After Hours, and C. Thomas Howell and Zelda Rubinstein and Isaac Hayes again, and an incredible cast of people. And that was it was a Scream Queen whodunit. It was about a Scream Queen actress played by Linda Fiorentino, whose producer has been murdered, and she's the prime suspect, and she goes on the lam to try to figure out who really did it to save her, save her neck. And so that was loads of fun. And then my manager at the time was a former actress named Venetia Stevenson. She was in Horror Hotel with Christopher Lee. She was in an Alfred Hitchcock Presents. She was in a bunch of films back in the 60s. But in her later days, she transitioned into being a manager. Her mother was Anna Lee, an actress who was in the Neighbor and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. She was in Sound of Music. So her mom was in a lot of stuff. And her father was Robert Stevenson, who directed Mary Poppins and all kinds of movies. And so she was a big showbiz. She'd grown up in the whole world of show business. Anyway, she knew Charlie Band at Full Moon, and she arranged for a meeting. And Charlie had actually seen both of my earlier films, Guilty as Charged and Acting on Impulse. And so we had this meeting at Full Moon, and he was developing, one of the many projects he was developing was Oblivion. And he started to show me different drawings and sort of sketches of the different characters in it, because it had this incredible array of ensemble of characters. And they and gave me the script to read and everything. And he ended up offering me the job to direct Oblivion. So that kind of brings us up to Full Moon.
Awesome. Yeah, you kind of hit on like several questions I was already going to ask, so that's like really cool. But that's crazy that it works out. I mean, like a lot of kids, you have a dream of something that you want to do and it doesn't work out. But here you are, 8 years old. This is what I'm going to do. Yeah. It works out, and here you are now.
Yeah. Well, and the teachers at school hated that. They kept saying, you need to be well-rounded and everything. They didn't think that working in movies was like going to ever work out or be a real job. And
yeah,
they fought me on it all the time. And that just made me all the more determined, I was like, I'm going to show them wrong. And so, yeah, it was frustrating in school. I couldn't wait to get out of school, but I felt like I needed that, diploma to say that I was, civilized human being, I guess. But even by the time I got to film school and college, I was so advanced because of self-learning with my own, movies and stuff that, it did feel like going through the motions quite a bit. I was just so itching to get on a real set and really learn. My education was really working for De Palma and watching him plan his films and storyboard them and all of the pre-production work that went into it, and then being on set and watching it all unfold. I mean, that was my true education.
Yeah. So, I mean, can you tell us more about like the work that you and De Palma did and like your experiences with him?
Yes. Well,
obviously he was a huge influence for you, and that's kind of where you got a lot of your start.
yes. And he, I mean, I was a huge fan of Hitchcock, and I had studied Hitchcock in film school, which and that particular thing was very, very useful, I will say. And you know, Hitchcock was famous for pre-planning his films and storyboarding them, and just once you went on set, it was going through the motions because you'd already made the movie in your head and on paper. And that's exactly what De Palma did. He really, really focused his energies so much in pre-production to plan everything. In his office, we put up cork boards all around the walls, and he would draw out little stick figure drawings on little tiny business card sized cards, and he would tack them up on the wall, and he'd have these long vertical rows for each scene. And you know, some scenes, if they were short, it would just be a few cards for each of the shots.
Yeah.
But longer scenes might require several vertical rows. And one of my jobs was to very carefully take the cards down and write on the back code numbers, you know, like this would be row 1, card 4, and so on. And I would lay them onto the Xerox machine on the glass and Xerox them into 1 billion pages that we would give out to the different, you know, the cinematographer, the editor, the different department heads of the film. And then once I finished Xeroxing them, of course, I had to put them all back up the way they were in case he was going to make any changes or adjustments. And just being able to study those so carefully, and I had to know exactly what they were. He wasn't the greatest artist in the world, and sometimes people on the crew would like, what exactly is this? And they would come to me rather than to him. And I would need to know, you know, oh yeah, well this is such and such, and I would have to describe it to them. And then if I didn't know, or it was a question that I, you know, didn't understand, that I personally hadn't learned yet, then I would be the one to go ask De Palma about that. And it just, it was just really, really a fascinating process. And then to see it unfold on the set, and actually these cards coming to life, but also seeing that, okay, in this particular case, we're going to have to make an adjustment. Like one scene in Dress to Kill, the producers and everybody had jumped through hoops to get this restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center when there were the Twin Towers, and it was windows on the World Restaurant, and he wanted this great scene that happens toward the end of the movie where Nancy Allen and Keith Gordon are at a table and they're talking about what actually happens during a sex change operation, and they're talking about all the gory details of it. And there's this woman at the next table who's overhearing this and completely appalled. And it was a very comical little scene. And but De Palma wanted to shoot it at this incredible view out these windows of, you know, all of Manhattan and all surrounding areas, and it was spectacular when you were up there. I had been to that restaurant many times because I lived in New York in those days. And the day we get up there, it's completely overcast and raining, and the view out the windows is just pure white. I mean, literally, we could have just put a table on a sound stage and hung a white sheet out the window, and you would have had what we had. And of course, Brian was like, we can't shoot. We have to reschedule. We have to do another day. And the producer, George Lito, was like, Brian, no, we can't. We've spent unbelievable amounts of money to get this restaurant, and unbelievable amounts of money to get everybody here, and and we don't have the kind of money to do all again. And so he had to shoot it. And so in that case, all of his shots were aimed directly out the windows, of course. So he just rearranged it so that it would be looking more into the restaurant and not featuring, you know, this white cloud. And so you have to be able to adjust. And I certainly learned that on many occasions. And so you make your plan A, your best plan, But when you get on set, there's always changes, and there's always going to be adjustments and compromises and whatnot. So that was something I learned. I'll tell you, the first day on The Fury, the star of The Fury was Kirk Douglas, you know, this incredible, legendary actor. And he walked on set his first day, and I watched him, and he went around to every single person on the crew and introduced himself, asked their name and what they did. And then day 2, he came in and he went around to everyone on the crew and shook their hand and called them by name. How you doing, Joe? How you doing, Marty? Da, 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 da. And the crew was absolutely blown away. This had never happened to them. And they would have gone to the ends of the earth for this guy after that. They had so much respect that he was treating them as equals, as part of the family, and that made such an impression on me. And that's what I do on every film I ever make. I make sure that I learn everybody's name, and I go around at the end of the day, every day, and shake their hand and thank them by name. Well, now in post-COVID era, I'm not sure we're going to be shaking hands anymore, but
6 feet away.
But you know, I think that's so important to make the entire team feel like a part of it. I love your cameo appearance here with your who is this? Introduce us.
This is Dimitri.
Hi, Dimitri.
Yeah, he thinks he has to. Everybody has to see him and needs attention, and I'm not giving him enough attention right now.
Oh, exactly. He's having his little Hitchcock cameo right now.
Yeah.
That's so cute. I have 2 dogs myself, so if they start barking, you know, they're going to want equal time.
He's pretty good about not barking, as long as nobody's like walking past my window or anything, or knocking on the door. But he has to.
My dog is good about not barking until a leaf falls off a tree or some other, you know, tragedy. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's impressive. I guess I could understand how a actor would be able to remember everybody's names. I mean, you have so many lines to remember. That would make sense. If you could remember names, I'd be overwhelmed. It wouldn't be for a lack of trying.
Easy. It's not easy, and as I get older, you know, my brain I feel like my brain is on overload of remembering too many things, and it's hard. But I make a point of it, and I force myself to absolutely learn everybody's name, and everybody feels good about it, including me, because I think it's so important. And you know, when you suddenly have a crew of 40, 50 people, and you're thrown into this situation. I mean, the films that I do nowadays, they're quick shoots. They're only like 14 days usually, and you create this family unit, and you get very close because you're spending long hours and everything together. And then once it's over, everybody goes off their separate ways to do other projects. But invariably, some you end up crossing paths again, and you sort of pick up where you left off. But we're gypsies in this industry, and you have to, I just feel that it's very important that we make it as fun as it can be, and as much of a family atmosphere as it can be.
Right. Yeah. That's good. And I'm sure it makes it a lot better process throughout the whole filming to be able to feel like that.
Absolutely.
So what type of world building and sequences were you not able to fully flesh out due to budget time? So that was just you all being able to do the World Trade Center. Was that the only big issues you've ever had trying to film?
Well, no, there's been plenty of others where we didn't get what we wanted, but it's interesting, the films that I've done in the 1990s, I was able to do a number of films where I could we built sets for some of the sequences. And in those cases, I would collaborate with the production designer in coming up with exactly the look, and you would build it from the ground up, and it was, to specifications. and of exactly what's in my head, which was a really, really incredibly luxurious and fun thing to be able to do. Nowadays, I mostly do Christmas movies for the Hallmark Channel or thrillers for the Lifetime Channel, and they're shot on locations where you have to kind of adapt to the actual location itself. I mean, obviously in the Christmas movies, we decorate them out with Christmas decorations and that sort of thing. But you kind of have to take the location that you're given or that you find and adapt it and adjust your thinking according to that. You don't have the money really to go in and say, oh, I have a vision where every wall should be purple and you're going to paint all their walls. No. You pretty much have to take the color of the walls that they are. And you can do a few adjustments. You can change out artwork and a few pieces of furniture and things like that. But you generally don't have the budget or the time or the permission of the owners to do just anything. So when I worked on Guilty as Charged and on the Oblivion films for sure, and other movies like Elvira's Haunted Hills, Elvira's second movie that I directed, we were able to build those sets from the ground up, and that was just incredible. I absolutely loved every minute of that. And on the Oblivion films, when we got to Romania and we were going to be building this entire Western town, it was literally just a cornfield, and they had to level the cornfield. There was a forest across the road where they cut down trees to create their own lumber. And because labor was so cheap, they could hire, 100 guys to come in and start raising this town. And some of them didn't even have hammers. They would just use rocks. It was quite primitive, but the town came together really, really fast. And it is still there today. It's part of the backlot of Castel Film Studio in Romania, outside Bucharest. And you could see it in films. The last time I saw it was with the Hatfields and the McCoys, the Kevin Costner miniseries. There's our Western town. I'm like, oh my God. And it's been used on lots and lots of shows. So anyway, that was kind of fun that it's kind of this lasting thing that Oblivion created. But we designed that. Milo, who was the production designer on the Full Moon side, he worked with Radu Corcheva on the Romanian side, who was a fantastic production designer. And Radu also worked with me later on the Elvira film, on Elvira's Haunted Hills. And but at any rate, we just all sat together and said, okay, we need the saloon, we need Gaunt's, funeral home. And wouldn't it be funny if it was very tall and it was shaped like a coffin? And, we would just knock around ideas like this. And that's how the whole town sort of came together, and how the geography of where each of the different, the general store or the jail and those kinds of things, how it was determined where they were going to be in relation to the street itself. And so that was just, I miss that. I love being able to create things from the ground up like that. So that was really, really, really fun. And it was great to see it coming together too. It was just amazing. And that was a massive, massive set. Now, some of those storefronts, a lot of times these Western town sets are all just kind of storefronts. But if we knew we were going to have scenes inside a particular business like the saloon, they went ahead and built the whole saloon right there, practically. So if you were inside the saloon and you're looking out of the street through the swinging doors, you're really looking out on the actual street. And I think the only thing in Oblivion that wasn't right there was there was a cantina that Isaac Hayes was the bartender of, and Lash was the owner. And that one was not supposed to be on the main street of the town of Oblivion, and it was supposed to be kind of out on the outskirts. So we built the interior of that actually behind some of the storefronts that weren't being actually used. And so it was very close for us to be able to run in there and shoot stuff. But it didn't. The exterior of that was another location somewhere else. So that was one of the cheats that we had. When we started Oblivion shooting it, it was the fall of 1993, if I'm not mistaken, and it was warm weather. And by the time we finished, it was very cold and snowing. And we shot it. Well, I'll talk about. So I'll come back to talk about how we shot, how we organized the shoot. But basically, we had certain scenes where someone was going to, they'd walk out of a door and cross the street and then enter somewhere else or whatever. And with the way the schedule was, some of it was in the warm weather, and then it would cut to something that had to be shot in the cold weather, and we had to dig out the snow and make it look like it was warm again, and we had hair dryers drying icicles off of window panes, and then the actors had breath. You could see their breath. So I learned this little trick that if you put ice cubes in their mouth just before the take, it won't completely take away all of that condensation, but it'll take away quite a bit. And it wasn't nearly as noticeable. But so anyway, those were kind of funny. But one of the things that happened during pre-production on Oblivion was that Charlie Band, head of Full Moon, as you know, had only one script in mind, and it had been written by Peter David, who's a very famous writer now. He's done lots of Star Trek and all kinds of great stuff. But he had written the script, and it was very. I loved it. I just thought it was so much fun with these incredible characters, but as we were planning the construction and everything of the sets, the budget was getting pretty cramped. And this was back in the days when they had a deal where Full Moon had a deal with Paramount and actually had some decent budgets for once. But even so, this Western town and everything that was going into the movie and the cast that I wanted was just going to cost a lot of money. And so I went to Charlie and I said, look, remember the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers that Richard Lester directed back in the 70s? Well, though that started out as one movie. And as they were getting through production, they realized that the running time was going to be like 4 hours, and they decided to split it into two different movies. And I said, why don't we shoot two Oblivion movies? Why don't we write another script, a sequel, and shoot them together, and that way the cost of building the set can be amortized over the budget of two movies, and the cost of these actors that I want can be amortized over two movies. And Charlie was like, that's a great idea. So we got Peter David to quickly write another script. He sent us a treatment, and we went back and forth, and we said, yes, this is perfect, go, write. And he just turned it out like really, really fast. And we were, we were getting the actors that I really wanted. I wanted Julie Newmar, who was the Catwoman on Batman in the 60s. I wanted her to play Kitty, the feline alien who runs the saloon. And I wanted George Takei from Star Trek to play the town drunk. And I wanted, Isaac Hayes to come again, because he had been in both of my earlier films. And Carl Stryken, who was Lurch in the Addams Family movies and the Giant on Twin Peaks, and he was the obvious choice. He had to play Gaunt, and on and on and on. So, and they all said yes. I mean, they loved the script, they loved the characters, and we just were incredibly lucky. And so that's the way it all kind of worked out. Now, in terms of the shooting schedule, I shot it as one big movie, basically. If we were in the saloon, we'd shoot all the scenes in the saloon for both films, and so on. And the only time, most of the actors were there the whole time because they appear in just about every location. Isaac Hayes had a tricky schedule. He had some other things going on, and so he was only there for maybe 2 weeks, and we had to schedule all of his scenes together. And that was one of the things that kind of screwed us up in terms of the snow and whatnot. If we had a scene on the street that we had to shoot, but then there were some other scenes with Isaac Hayes on the street or whatever, we had to wait until he got there, and that's when the snow was there. So, those kinds of things created a little bit of trickiness, but that happens on every film. But for the most part, we shot it, we would shoot out a location if we could. If the actors were all there, we would shoot out the location, and we would just go one location at a time. And it went great. We shot it in about, I can't remember exactly, but it was about 3 months or so. Probably about 5 weeks per film. If you split it up, I guess, something like that. It was about maybe 2.5 months. But it was, we had a little bit of budget, and it worked out great. Now in post-production, we immediately started editing the first one, but Charlie didn't need the second one right away. He was going to release that a year or two down the road. So we completed the post-production on the first one. And I had gotten to know Pino Donaggio, the great composer, when I was working with De Palma. He had done the scores for Carrie, for home movies, for Dress to Kill, for Blowout, Body Double, all these great De Palma films. And even before those De Palma films, he had done a great thriller called Don't Look Now that Nicholas Roeg directed with Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. And I had always loved that score. And then when Brian started to use him for Carrie and all these other things, I was so excited because I was just a big fan of that composer. And I met him when he came. He's Italian. He lives in Italy, in Rome. But he came to the U.S. on Home Movies, the De Palma film, and on Dress to Kill to meet with Brian, to see the film, to have the spotting session, which is the session where the director and the composer sit and stop and watch the film in the editing room and stop and start and say, okay, this is the frame where we want the music to start. We want to make sure there's a big sting when the boogeyman jumps out here. And they, discuss exactly the layout of the score. And then Pino would go back to Italy, write the score, and record it with an orchestra in Italy. So anyway, I wanted him to do the score for Oblivion. And lo and behold, Charlie also knew Pino Donaggio, because I think he had done a score for one of his films at Empire or something. I forget what the history was. But they kind of knew each other as well. And so Charlie agreed, and we got the great Pino Donaggio to do the score with a full orchestra, and it was just absolutely amazing. Okay, flash forward to when we finally get around to editing Oblivion 2. Mm-hmm. Now the Paramount deal has collapsed.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. There's no more money, and we, just had to cut corners in post-production, and some of the effects became less expensive and less complicated and whatnot. And when it came time to talk about the music score, Charlie was like, well, we don't have the money to hire Pino Donaggio again. We're going to get my brother, Richard Band, to do a score on synthesizer. And I was like, Richard had sandwiched in between editing the first Oblivion and editing the second Oblivion, I had directed Magic Island for Full Moon's Moonbeam label, which is their sort of kids' family film label that was also financed through Paramount. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Richard Band had done the score for that, for, I guess, the same reason. By the time we were editing, the deal had fallen apart and money was tight. And Richard did an amazing score. And even though it was all digital and synthesizers and stuff, it sounded great, and I loved it. So it wasn't that I didn't appreciate Richard as a composer. But on Oblivion, I wanted the same flavor. And I was so upset when the 3 and 4 Musketeers ended up having 2 different composers. The first one was Michel Legrand, and the second one was Lalo Schifrin, the Mission Impossible guy. And both are incredible composers, but you got so used to the themes and the style of what Michel Legrand created in the first one that when the second one comes on, you're like, what's this music? What? I want that theme. I want, you want the familiarity. And so anyway, as I was editing Oblivion 2, I used all of Pino's score from the first one as temp music to at least give Richard Band an idea of the style and the things that we wanted. But as we got deeper into it, I just was so married to hearing Pino's score, and it worked out so beautifully the way we edited his music to the second one that I finally just went into Charlie and I said, let's just use this temp version and we'll recycle Pino's score. And so so Charlie agreed to do that. And so luckily both films feel very united in terms of how the music continues to play in the exact same vein, because it's reusing the music. And there were actually even a couple of cues that we decided we didn't need from the first one. And so there are a couple of Pino cues that were never heard in the first one that actually get used in the second one. So I felt really good. I thought that worked out really well.
Yeah. So I guess with this whole, we have the genre of space western. I mean, that's the whole theme here. And it's so popular. So, I mean, do you know why that's happened? Like, and how it's been an influence over so many projects, over so many different mediums since then?
Yeah, it's, it is kind of mythic in the way that, I mean, Star Wars, everything is all, it all goes back to kind of Westerns. And I think, I don't know what that is. I think as kids, we all see films as kids that become very seminal influences on us. And I know that George Lucas was certainly very influenced by serials and by Westerns, and it's a soup of all sorts of stuff. But there's something about those Westerns, the traditional old style Westerns.
Oh no.
Okay, I'll go back. I'll just start that answer again. Let's see. Yeah, the combination of sci-fi and Westerns is pretty, it's been done a lot. and I guess, George Lucas sort of really took it to a whole new level with Star Wars. Those films very much influenced by the Westerns that he saw as a kid, and there's the villains are villains, the good guys are the good guys, and it's always it follows the same sort of patterns and stuff. Although I don't think that George's films have so much Western imagery in it, although there's a few things you could certainly say are. But, in Oblivion, we really embrace the Western imagery and mixing it with the sci-fi elements. Now, that had been done before. Westworld, for instance, the original with Yul Brynner. Valley of Gwangi comes to mind, which was cowboys and a dinosaur, and there's a Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation dinosaur kind of thing. So it cropped up here and there, but we really took it, full. We took it all the way, and just had fun with it, and really, took all the tropes and the cliches of Westerns and put that all in there, and then took a lot of the tropes and cliches of science fiction, space movies, and put those in there, and just had fun with it. And it was all very tongue-in-cheek and loads of fun. Now, Peter David's script originally had lots of humor in it, and it was definitely very tongue-in-cheek to begin with. I added a few inside jokes with, like, George Takei doing a few Star Trek-y kind of things. Like, I had him come out of the bar with a bottle of Jim Beam, And he looks at the bottle and he says, "Jim, beam me up," and takes a big swig. And then there was another time where he did the Star Trek Live Long and Prosper. Yeah, he did that in one of the scenes, and that was all my doing. And Peter David, the writer, was not. Initially, he wasn't real happy about that. He thought it was too silly. But I think he softened his stance on that over the years, because those scenes are things that fans really love and they remember, and they always ask about it and everything. And so I felt really good about it. And then with Julie Newmar, with her character of Miss Kitty, we put in some Catwoman references, and she says perfect, and does a few of those things that her character did in the Batman series. So we just had fun with it, and wanted it to be fun for fans, and so we did. And I think that it has a cult following, and people always ask me about it, and I'm just so proud of it. I wish we could have done more. I think it was so perfect to have spawned a whole series of movies, and it should have spawned a TV series. I think it could still be made into a TV series even now. Someone could reboot it, and I think it would be great. They'd probably have to recast a lot of the actors and whatnot, but I think it could be done. I would love to see it. It's been rebooted in comic books. I've seen some comic books out there, and so who knows? Who knows what'll happen? Maybe someday.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of movies and shows and stuff that's getting rebooted and redone in so many different ways. So maybe this will be the next thing they move on to.
Well, exactly. And I think that young people who, saw it and loved it, maybe if they're in the industry, that it's going to be one of their passion projects that they want to see happen again. I mean, that would just be really fun and delightful. I hope it happens.
Yeah. So you do a lot of different things with like writing and directing and being a professor as well. So can you explain to us the process for you to have to switch between all these different hats that you wear?
Well, yeah, it's like I do a little of everything. You're right. I aside from directing, I've done some producing. I was one of the producers of Gods and Monsters, the film that Bill Condon directed with Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser and Lynn Redgrave. And it was a movie about James Whale, who was the director of Bride of Frankenstein, my favorite film of all time. I mean, it was a dream project. And we even had a flashback scene on the set of the laboratory in Bride of Frankenstein, and we built that entire set to duplicate exactly the James Whale set, and we even found some of the original electrical equipment that had been used in the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein that was designed by Kenneth Strickfaden. And it had also been used, Mel Brooks had tracked it down for Young Frankenstein, so it also appears in Young Frankenstein. And so that was a dream project, unbelievably great. And of course, Bill Condon won the Oscar for Best Screenplay for it, and Ian McKellen was nominated for Best Actor, and Lynn Redgrave was nominated for Supporting Actress, and she actually won the Golden Globe for that. And so that was really great. And I also produced a film called Teen Monster. It's also known as Big Monster on Campus and Boltneck. It goes by all sorts of titles, but it's Ryan Reynolds playing a teen Frankenstein monster. And so that was really fun because it tapped into my love of all things Frankenstein. And it had, it had Matthew Lawrence as the teenager who was sort of the Dr. Frankenstein. His family name was Stein, and his parents were played by Shelley Duvall and Judge Reinhold, and it was just a really fun, cute film. It was kind of like a Frankenweenie sort of thing in modern day suburbia, and I did, other things as a producer, but my heart is really not in producing because it's more of the business side. And so I've pretty much set those things aside, and when people ask me to produce things, I pretty much turn it down nowadays. I really just want to direct. And so I consider myself a director for hire. I much prefer to, rather than write my own projects, because it ends up going through so many rewrites and development hell. They call it development hell for a reason. And I don't like it. I don't like the process. So I'd rather just come in as a director for hire. It's already been developed. The script is ready. It's financed. They're ready to shoot. Let's go. I like the energy of just jumping in and rushing to get everything ready for shooting, shoot it, and then, edit it quickly and be done with it. And that's what I do a lot nowadays on these TV movies that I do for Lifetime and Hallmark and that sort of thing. And in between gigs, I do writing for myself, labor of love writing, books, magazine articles on, it's all on film or show business in some way or another. And I have won 2 Rondo Awards, the Rondo Classic Horror Film Awards, I guess they're called. And one for, I guest edited an entire issue of Little Shop of Horrors magazine on the making of a Universal NBC miniseries from the 70s called Frankenstein, the True Story. And I edited this entire issue and wrote the entire making of. It's almost like a book. It's 120 pages, 400 photographs, and we've got a fold-out mural cover by the great artist Mark Maddox, and I got Anne Rice to write the foreword right here.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because this was the movie that inspired her to write Interview with the Vampire. But anyway, I'm so proud of it, and it got the Rondo Award for Best Article of the Year. And then my dear friend, Cassandra Peterson, who's Elvira, Scream Magazine asked me if I wanted to interview her. And I said, yes, I would love to do that, because there's always questions that nobody asks her. And so I did end up doing a very extensive interview for her in Scream Magazine, and it won the Rondo Award for Best Interview of the Year. So that was really cool. And then occasionally, if I'm really passionate about something, I will do the extras for a Blu-ray or whatever. And I just, this year, the Blu-ray of Frankenstein, the True Story, that same mini-series that I wrote about in the magazine, Screen Factory put this out on Blu-ray, and I did all of the extras for it. I did a 3-hour, the whole movie lasts 3 hours. And so I did this 3-hour audio commentary to beat all audio commentaries. And it interviews with some of the people that are still around. Jane Seymour, who played the female creature, Leonard Whiting, who plays Dr. Frankenstein. And then I've got the co-writer, Don Bacardi, to also do an interview for that. So I'm very proud of that. And then completely off genre, I did a biography of an entertainer named Kay Thompson. It's called Kay Thompson From Funny Face to Eloise. She was the author of the Eloise children's books, and she was in a film called Funny Face with Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire, and she was really involved behind the scenes for decades with all the big musical stars, from Frank Sinatra to Judy Garland, who her goddaughter was Liza Minnelli, who she lived with for the last 20 years of her life. She guided her whole career. So anyway, this is a whole book on that, and this got a big publishing deal with Simon & Schuster, and it was excerpted in Vanity Fair and everything else. It was really cool. And then recently, during the COVID-19, since I haven't been able to direct any movies, I decided to write a children's book parody about the toilet paper shortage that we all went through back in March and April and May. And this is called Sam's Toilet Paper Caper. And it's a spoof of the trials and tribulations that I went through to find toilet paper during that time. And it's illustrated by Dan Gallagher, who's a big horror film nut like I am. And we put all kinds of film references in here. And we made the grocery store clerk look like Peter Lorre and did it all very film noir. And I've got, when I get to the store, I feel like everybody's going to be laughing at me. They're all going to laugh at you, like in Carrie. And so we did a Carrie page where I'm getting doused with blood. And anyway, it was the most fun to do, and exactly what I needed because I needed a laugh during this time.
Oh, yeah.
All the profits from this book, I'm donating to the World Health Organization COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund, every penny. And you can order it on Amazon. Sorry to be a salesman, but I feel like it's a really great cause too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's $10 on Amazon. You got to get one. Every bathroom in the world needs one of these because it's the perfect reading material on the porcelain throne.
Well, it'll be perfect to have several years from now and remember that whole toilet paper shortage. Just give that to like grandkids and stuff. Be like, this is what I went through.
Yes, I think it is going to be a real memento from this crazy year we've been in. It's nuts. But and as you say, I did some teaching. I haven't done it. I started getting so many directing gigs, I don't have time for that anymore. But for about 3 or 4 years, I was teaching graduate directing courses at the University of Southern California's Cinematic Arts Division. And one of my students was Ryan Coogler, who graduated and went on immediately to direct Fruitvale Station, Creed, and Black Panther. And I'm so proud of him. And he's just like...
He's really going well for him.
Yeah, he's done quite well for himself. And so that was really exciting. And of course, his entire career is completely, he owes everything to me and what I taught him.
So in your teaching to your students, I mean, do you have any big keys or points that you try to drive home? Did he ever use some of the stuff that you taught him that you're like, that was definitely me?
I wish I could point to something, but no, Ryan was a very, very talented guy before I even got my hands on him. So, no, I think I was definitely teaching the art of shooting with 2 cameras. I shoot everything nowadays with 2 cameras. I have for the last, 15 years at least. I can't even imagine shooting something with 1 camera anymore. And so a lot of the students had never had, I don't think any of the students had had that experience. So I would insist that they shoot at least some of their scenes with 2 cameras to get used to that. And so that was one of the things that I was really championing, because that's what's going on these days. You're just not shooting with a single camera anymore. And with digital, it's affordable. You know, when you're using film, it was very expensive to shoot 2 cameras at the same time. But now with digital, it's just the way to go. And with budget so tight and schedules so tight and everything, there's no choice. You have to, or you'll never be able to get all the coverage that you need to get. So that was definitely a focus of mine. And then, pre-production, I go back to it. You've got to have a plan. You can't walk onto a set and scratch your head and go, what are we going to do today? And you just can't make movies that way. There's too much money. You've got to go in with a very, very tight game plan.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine just kind of going there and you're wasting time if you don't have a plan. And everybody's depending on you. Yeah.
The other thing I noticed with a lot of film students is that, they have the mentality of, I'm going to be an auteur. I'm going to have a distinctive style. I'm going to, make movies that are going to be at the Sundance Film Festival. And I had one student who's like, I don't believe in coverage, in close-ups or anything. I want everything shot like a play. I just want each scene is going to be 1 shot, and it's going to be a wide shot, and that's it. And I'm like, well, you know, that might work as a gimmick for one film, and maybe you can get lucky enough to where it becomes the Sundance darling, and you're catapulted into fame and fortune over that one film. But after that, you know, I don't know that gimmick is going to keep working. And if you're going to be a director in this business, you're not going to be able to go in and direct an episode of Game of Thrones and say, well, we're going to shoot every shot, every scene in one shot from a distance. You know, no, you're going to, when you get hired in so many situations, you have to adapt to a style or a Bible that has already been established. And you've got to go in with, you know, a full kit and an arsenal of experience. It's like, I'd say to someone, if, you know, oh, I want to be an artist, but I like modern art. I just want to throw paint on a canvas. And I'm like, well, that's all fine and well, but you need to learn how to draw a still life of an apple and a vase, and you need to be able to draw a portrait of someone. You need to have the basics. You need to have all of that. So when you're asked and required to do it, you've had that experience and you know how to do it. You can't just perfect one style. And so that was, you know, a lot of students had a hard time wrapping their head around that. And I said, you know, look, if you have you know, if you have a bank account and you can finance your own films, great, do whatever you want. But most of the time, you're going to be relying on other people's money, and they're going to want to get that money back. And you need to be able to do things in a commercial way that will sell and be able to adapt to things. So, you know, that's a hard thing for idealistic filmmakers sometimes to wrap their head around, because they're so sometimes stuck in the idea that they want to create art, and it's show business. You know, if you want to be completely artistic and not have to listen to any suggestions or conform to anything, then you need to be an artist and, you know, buy your own canvas and your own paints and go into a room by yourself and create that. But films are created by, you know, teams of 50, 100 people. If it's a Marvel movie, thousands of people. Yeah. And so it's never, you know, one vision. It's never one person's vision entirely. So, you know, that was also something that it was tough love that some of the students didn't want to hear, but I think it's for their own good, because if they want an actual career in the business, they need to be able to adapt to different situations and different styles. I mean, good Lord, look at the stuff that I make for Hallmark or Lifetime. I mean, they're very formulaic. They have a whole set of rules and do's and don'ts and everything. And so, you know, that you have to work within that and make the best thing you can possibly make it better than anyone's ever done it before. But the challenge is to keep it within those restraints and everything. And I always find that fun.
Yeah, kind of just challenging yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, how good am I really if I can do what I need to do with what you want me to do, and you can still tell it's me? And yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. It's exactly what I try to do, at least.
Awesome. I guess my last question for the night then is, obviously the whole entertainment industry and everything we've had, you know, has been rocked this year with COVID-19 and, you know, everything shutting down, having new rules, how we have to do everything. Do you think that you'll be you're going to start to gain any steam and be able to get back to work within, you know, next year or something with filmmaking? Do you have any projects that you expect to be working on already?
Well, I hope so. They are starting some productions up. Some of my colleagues have been working on some Hallmark Christmas movies because that's got to be fed. That appetite has got to be fed, and they're going to have a whole bunch of new Christmas movies this year. And I could end up getting hired to do something. Nothing's definite. There were a couple of calls have asked about my availability and that sort of thing. So it's starting to percolate again. And if I don't make a film before the end of the year, I'm sure that I will be working on something early, within the first half of next year for sure. There's definitely one film for Hallmark that I am contracted to do. It was supposed to happen in Hawaii in the spring, but of course got postponed. And so I'm just kind of waiting to hear when that's going to get rescheduled. To go to Hawaii, for a while, they require a 2-week quarantine when you get to Hawaii and that sort of thing. So that's been one of the sticking points. But that restriction may be loosened, and if it is, then that could happen. It's going to be a different situation because of the protocols, the safety protocols. Any movie that's made is going to have very, very, very strict safety protocols in terms of COVID-19, and there will be a COVID-19 monitor on set to make sure that the guidelines are followed and all that kind of thing. So I'll feel, I think the cast and the crew will feel fairly safe, but obviously nothing is foolproof, and things happen. I mean, gosh, the Batman movie that Robert Pattinson was filming in England, he got COVID and they had to shut down. So even on gigantic big budget films where the protocols, I'm sure, were being followed very carefully, there can be exposure that can happen. So it's a little scary, it's a little daunting, but I'm itching to get back to work, and people are itching for new products. So it's gonna eventually happen. I just hope that they get a vaccine sooner rather than later, and then we can really get back to work more safely.
Yeah. I guess the other option would be, I can't remember, the guy who made the bubble for like the NBA team, have him come out and be like, okay, how are we designing this so none of us get sick and we can make movies? Exactly. Clearly it worked. He's onto something.
Exactly. I saw a clip where on the soap operas, they're using mannequins for the kissing shots. They'll be over the shoulder of a mannequin that has like the hair and stuff, and the poor actor is like leaning in to kiss this mannequin, and then on the wide shot they have like the two actors standing a little bit apart or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I've done some crazy things and I could be doing stuff like that, but man, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. This whole COVID-19 experience is going to be really interesting once we get back to movies, to ask people, like, what was your experience with this? How did you go to this movie and this show and just follow the protocols? Like, what did you have to do? It's going to be very interesting.
Yes. Now, did you want to ask me anything about Magic Island? I don't know if you guys are covering the moonbeam pictures that Full Moon did during the Paramount Day.
That wasn't in my list of stuff, but if you have some updates for us about it,
well, it was. Let me talk about it a little bit, and then you could cut it in earlier when we were talking about Oblivion.
We're definitely interested in Moonbeam. Any Moonbeam insight that doesn't get talked about enough.
Okay, good. After I finished directing the 2 Oblivion films in Romania and came back to the US, and we were editing Oblivion 1, and we had put the footage for Oblivion 2 aside to do the post-production on that later. Then Charlie Band came to me and with a script called Magic Island, and asked if I would read it and consider directing it. And they were going to be doing that one in Mexico, in Ixtapa, Zihuatanejo. And I read it, loved it. It's a pirate time travel movie with a stop motion stone giant that we could do, like the Ray Harryhausen sequences. And I was like, oh yes, sign me up. I am so into this. I've always wanted to do a pirate movie, time travel, stop motion. All this was just right up my alley. So so we went to Mexico and did that, and it was for the Moonbeam label, which is Full Moon's family label, and it was part of the Paramount deal in those days. So we had a little bit of money, and I cast Andrew Divoff, who played Red Eye in the Oblivion films. I cast him as Blackbeard, the pirate, and we got French Stewart from Third Rock from the Sun to come in and play his very foppish sort of sidekick on the boat. And we had Zachary Ty Bryan was the lead, and he was one of the kids on Home Improvement. And anyway, it was a really fun cast, and we shot that in Ixtapa, and it was we built the big treasure, this sort of underground tomb where they find this treasure that they're trying to get, and guarding the tomb was this big stone giant, basically, that comes to life when they start to desecrate the tomb, because the stone giant is guarding it. And so that was the big Ray Harryhausen sort of homage sequence. And that was really, really fun to do. And then watch it all come together. And Joe Grossberg was heading up the stop motion animation team at Full Moon. And he had also done the stop motion animation of the giant scorpions in Oblivion, and just did amazing work. And so it was great fun. And working in Mexico was a little different than Romania. There was a lot more corruption. There were trucks that drove down different set pieces from Full Moon that were in Los Angeles that would drive down to Mexico. And I remember they got stopped at the border, and there was all sorts of money that had to change hands before it could get there. And so that was that was frustrating at times. But I was sheltered from a lot of that. I found out more after we finished shooting than what I was aware of during the shoot. They didn't want me to worry. And but we got it done. And there was, a few daunting things. We had a mermaid in the film, this young girl, and the fin that they had made for her was so heavy that it basically, you put it in the water and it was like, it just wanted to sink. And so it was tricky, but we managed to get the shots we needed, and it was always sort of compromises that had to be made, but it was great fun. There was a land shark, I guess, or this sort of creature that swum around in sand and comes and attacks Zachary Ty Bryan during the pizza tree sequence, a tree that grows slices of pizza. Yes, this was a family film. And anyway, it was just great fun, and all the actors had such a fun time. And and then, as I said earlier, we came back to edit it, and by then the Paramount deal had sort of fallen apart, and there was not a lot of money for post-production. I was worried that the stop motion of the stone giant wouldn't get completed, but we managed to get that completed. And the score was done on synthesizers and digitally by Charlie's brother, Richard Band. Did a great score. It's got all the sort of pirate flavor and everything to it. I thought he did a fantastic job of doing that. And so that's also something that I'm very proud of, and hope that it will get seen more. It was very popular back in the mid. It came out in '95 on video, and then the Disney Channel licensed it and played the hell out of it for several years in the 90s. And I'm gay and have a husband that I've been with for 38 years and counting. But I was married to a woman for 6 years before that, and and we're still very good friends. And she called me in the late 90s and said, my son, who is 11, not mine, but from her subsequent marriage, my son has been watching this film, Magic Island, over and over and over on the Disney Channel. It's his favorite film. He just absolutely adores it. And I finally sat down and watched it with him. And lo and behold, your name came up as the director. And I'm like, and she was like, I couldn't believe the coincidence. And she said, is that you by any chance as the gold wizard in the climax? And I'm like, yep, that's me. I appear in that film. When they go down into the treasure room, I am a gold face on the wall in bas relief, and there's a hole in the wall. They painted my face in gold, and I do the who dares to enter the tomb of whatever. And so my ex-wife says, I've been waiting for the opportune time to tell my son that I used to be married. And so now I'll be able to tell him that I was married to the gold wizard from Magic Island, and he's going to be very impressed. So that's always the story I remember about that film. It's, but it definitely was really, really popular with kids back then.
Yeah. That sounds like a pretty cool experience to have. And a good way to relate that back to like yourself again after that. You still get to have really good memories. Yeah.
And actually, while we're talking about my appearances, I do appear in the Oblivion films. In the first Oblivion film, I'm in the stocks, where you're in this wooden thing where your hands are through two holes and your head is through a hole. I'm in the stocks in the town square in Oblivion 1. And then in Oblivion 2, I play a cowboy named Stogie Joe, and I walk into the cantina where Isaac Hayes is the bartender, and I start to fire up a cigar, and my sidekick I've got the cigar, and my sidekick, is going to light it for me. Mm-hmm. And Isaac Hayes at the bar says, hold on. And he points to a sign that says, no smoking. And I'm like, I'm the tough guy. And I'm like, pfft. And I go ahead and light it up. And as soon as I take a big drag off the cigar, boom, I get shot in the back, dead. And I fall over onto the table. And it cuts to Lash, who's sitting in the corner with a smoking gun. And she blows the smoke and goes, those things will kill you. And turns out that she's bought the cantina, and it's now her bar, and she sets all the rules, and she is going to make sure that no smoking is is followed. And then it cuts back to Isaac Hayes at the bar, who takes a piece of chalk, and you see that he's keeping score on all the people that have been killed for smoking, and it's these little slashes, where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and the slash through it, and he adds one more slash for me. So that was probably the most elaborate Hitchcock cameo that I've ever done in any of my films. So that was loads of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us and doing this interview. It was great to learn more about your experience from your childhood and getting to see how your dad and your granddad played a major role in you deciding at 8 years old that this is what you were going to do, and getting to see you fulfill that dream.
Yep. And still at it. Very proudly so.
Yeah. And I'll look forward to buying that book off of Amazon and donating that $10 to the Who Foundation, and hopefully we get through this whole COVID thing. And
Sam's Toilet Paper Caper. You'll love it.